Either kill me or stop it now, Chand Bibi whimpered in between screams of pain. As the men of the village watched, she had been pinned to the ground by two men, one her own brother. Then, with metronomic precision, a black turban cleric took his lash to her body. Early in 2009, Pakistan had signed a peace deal with jihadists of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or TTP, ceding them control of the Swat Valley's judicial system. The video was widely circulated, an education on life in the shade of the Sharia. She came out of a house with another guy who was not her husband, a TTP spokesperson said. So we must punish her. There are boundaries you cannot cross. Last month, that very spokesperson, the jihadist commander Muslim Khan, was secretly flown out of death row at a military prison in Pakistan into the custody of the Afghan Taliban in Kabul. His release is key to a series of complex steps to secure a deal with the TTP. Led by Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, former chief of the Inter-Services Intelligence and now commanding officer of the Peshawar headquartered 11 Corps. Even as the TTP and the Pakistan Army have ostensibly been observing a ceasefire, jihadist attacks have continued. Just this week, a soldier was killed in an attack on a military outpost in North Waziristan, and 8 more died in another assault across the Afghan border last month. Escalating TTP violence ever since its Taliban patrons took power in Kabul, the worst in years according to scholar Amira Jadoon and Abdul Saeed, gives Islamabad excellent reasons to do a deal with the TTP. Yet the forgotten video of Chand Bibi's punishment and the massive surge of violence of which it was just a small part are reminders that peace with the jihadis might prove to be just as bloody as war. From interviews conducted by the journalist Imtiaz Ali, it is clear Muslim Khan's story mirrors those of many jihadist leaders from Pakistan's northwest. Educated at a government-run school in Kozabanda, the village where he was born, Khan is believed to have gone on to study at Jahanzeb Government Graduate College in the town of Mingora in 1972. He marked the rise of a new educated class in Pakistan's tribal areas, which hoped to sweep aside feudal tribal leadership, and discovered the Kalashnikov was just the tool for its cause. That period was the high noon of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the charismatic prime minister who melded socialism with Islam. Led by the cleric Qausar Niazi, who preached a kind of liberation theology, casting Sharia as the key to social justice, Muslim Khan dropped out of postgraduate studies to become a full-time Pakistan People's Party activist. By Muslim Khan's own account of events, he was passionately committed to the cause. On one occasion, he kidnapped 2 government officials after a PPP student activist was killed and ended up spending almost a month in prison for his crime. Like millions of other young radicals though, Muslim Khan's early political career ended in disillusion. From the 1980s, Khan later told the journalist Abdul Hai Kakad he left Swat to work with a British shipping company. There are accounts somewhat opaque that the jihad commander also worked in the United States, first with a house painting company in Boston and then at a petrol pump. Then, after the first Gulf War broke out, Muslim Khan returned home and set up a pharmaceutical store in Mingora. The diaspora dream was in his sight, but Khan hadn't quite given up on his utopian politics. From early in the 1990s, Muslim Khan became active in the Tehreek-e-Nafaz-e-Shariat-e-Mohammadi or TNSM, which means the movement for implementing the Prophet Muhammad's law. Led by the former Jamaat-e-Islami politician Sufi Muhammad bin Hassan, the movement called for the implementation of the Sharia in Swat. The TNSM mobilized against Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto's government in 1994, drawing tens of thousands into its crusade against a woman ruling Islamic Pakistan. And following 9/11, Sufi Muhammad raised thousands of volunteers to fight along the Afghan Taliban. Imprisoned for this crime until 2008, the TNSM left control to his son-in-law Fazal Hayat and a generation of jihadists who would go on to found the TTP 5 years later. Like so many of the TNSM's rank and file, Muslim Khan became impatient with Sufi Muhammad's calls for political struggle against the Pakistani state. In one interview, he called the TNSM a party of old men who can do nothing. In interviews, Muslim Khan laid out an expansive view of his aims. Initially, we want implementation of Sharia in our own region, he declared. And then we would like the same in the Northwest Frontier Province, and then ultimately the whole of Pakistan. He called on Muslims to unite in a single nation and, I quote, form a single army and a single currency. The concept of the Western form of democracy, he insisted, is against Sharia. Arrested in 2009 in the course of a Pakistan army offensive into Swat, Muslim Khan was eventually convicted by a military court for the killing of 34 people, including 4 army soldiers. He was also found guilty, a Pakistan Army press release records, of kidnapping 2 Chinese nationals for ransom. General Qamar Javed Bajwa, Pakistan's army chief, personally signed off on his death sentence. The appointment with the hangman, though, never came. Last year, when Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid began negotiating with the TTP in Kabul, using community elders as go-betweens, Muslim Khan's name was among those of over 100 prisoners the jihadist group sought released. The death row convicts' release would obviously have caused deep embarrassment to the Pakistan army. Eventually, Taliban Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani and Intelligence Chief Abdul Haq Wasik brokered a deal to hand key prisoners over to Kabul, while a final peace deal was hammered out. Following the surge of jihadist violence after 9/11, Daud Khatak has recorded, military ruler General Parvez Musharraf had also signed peace agreements with the commander Naik Muhammad Wazir in that case. The agreement unraveled inside days. In 2005, there was another deal with jihadist warlord Baitullah Mahsood, a third in Swat, several more written or unwritten in 2008-2009. Finally, in 2014, Pakistan's army was forced to go to war against the jihadists after the collapse of talks under Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Each peace deal saw jihadists resiling on their promises to sever ties with transnational groups like Al-qaeda and step up attacks on civilians opposed to them. Even the ideologically sympathetic Prime Minister Imran Khan, who preached for understanding for the arsonist, scholar Ehsan Butt has wryly observed, failed to secure peace. Islamabad had hoped that the rise of the Taliban would see the TTP evicted from its safe havens in Afghanistan and brought to the table. Instead, thousands of TTP prisoners were released and made their way home. Faced with economic meltdown as well as political chaos, the Pakistan army probably believes going to war is not now a viable choice. Even though the Pakistan army cannot publicly concede the TTP's demands, among them the withdrawal of the military from the tribal areas of the northwest and the imposition of Sharia across the region, it's likely seeking to buy time. Chand Bibi disappeared from the news 7 years after she was tortured in public. Summoned to the Supreme Court of Pakistan, she wisely testified that nothing had happened, never mind the video. 3 judges led by Chief Justice Mia Saqib Nisar concluded that the video was fake. Exactly who might have made it or why was never addressed by the learned judges. The jihadist sunrise over Pakistan's northwest threatens to make it a war-torn wasteland. The generals will likely call this peace. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint.